want to take this time to introduce Hank Milius with Meridian Health Services. Meridian is our presenting sponsor, and we are grateful to them for their support. Hank A. Milius is the president and CEO of Meridian Health Services. Meridian is a regional, private, not-for-profit behavioral health care system with over 600 employees providing services to over 13,000 patients. Today, Meridian Health Services has 10 locations and services over 20 counties throughout Indiana, including specialized facilities for primary medical care, children and family programs, hospital psychiatric services, residential living, and a child advocacy center. Hank is justifiably proud of the Child Advocacy Center, which has, with the help of the Delaware County Prosecutor's Office, brought 80% of those who have committed crimes against children to prosecution. That is well above the state average. Hank has been in the behavioral health industry since 1978 and served in executive management positions for over 20 years. His career has brought him to 4 different states. He received his Bachelor of Science degree from Illinois State University and received a Master of Science from the University of Chicago. He is a member of the American College of Healthcare Executives and has served on numerous boards and committees, including the National Association of Psychiatric Healthcare Systems, the Indiana Hospital and Healthcare Association, Missouri Hospital Association, the Indiana Council of Community Mental Health Centers, the Missouri Coalition of Community Health Centers, and is a past member of the Muncie, Delaware County Chamber of Commerce's Board of Directors. In addition to several other local civic leadership positions, Hank is also a member of Rotary. Now, I've known Hank for a while, so I'm going to deviate for 1 second and just say that as he comes up here, I'd like to ask him one important question, and that is, who is going to be the entertainment for Rialto 3 this year? Ladies and gentlemen, Hank Milius.
Well, now you put me on the spot. It's supposed to be a secret. Well, for those that don't know, Meridian has a charity gala May 19th, and we typically bring in a pretty good band. This year, I'm just so excited, and I just can't hide it. Who is it? Pointer Sisters. So we're bringing the Pointer Sisters. The reason why the Pointer Sisters are coming, we told them Mitch Daniels would be on the dance floor. Right? No? Okay. Well, it's a great segue to introducing, I think, a great Hoosier. Governor Mitch Daniels was elected as 49th governor in 2004. In 2008, he was reelected at a time in which very politically decisive time in the country. As you know, Indiana went with a Democratic president, and we retained Governor Daniels for his second term, which tells you how successful Governor Daniels was. Had the most votes that any other candidate before him. Very successful in business, was the CEO of the Hudson Institute, president of the Eli Lilly North American Pharmaceutical Operations. Government, equally successful before he became governor, was chief of staff for Senator Richard Lugar, senior advisor to President Ronald Reagan, director of the Office of Management and Budget under President George Bush, and won numerous awards, including the Woodrow Wilson National Fellowship Foundation Award for efforts to reform education. My wife, a 4th grade teacher, wants to let the governor know that she's never worked so hard in her life under his term. And all good. We could not continue the status quo, and hopefully one day we will have full-day kindergarten. Other awards, including the Real Leader Award from State Budget Solution, a national watchdog group, Wetland Conservation Award from Ducks Unlimited for efforts in land conservation, which I know is near and dear to the hearts of many hunters and fishermen, and most recently the Friends of the Family Award from the Indiana Family Institute. Now, if you recall, in 2004, Mitch really inherited some real issues, and he also came in with a real attitude. We're going to have an extreme makeover. If you remember the term, buckle up. And why was that? Well, because we had an $800 million budget deficit, okay? And within 1 year, we were able to turn around and have a $370 million state budget surplus. Give it up. For the first time, the state of Indiana now had a AAA credit rating, first in state history. First time it was balanced budget 8 years prior. Highly successful. More recently, and I could go on with all kinds of successes in the last 8 years, but the most recent success we're all very much aware of, Super Bowl. It took great vision, key leadership to bring this event to Indianapolis, once known as Naptown, no longer is. I was in different parts of the country, and I've never heard so many positive comments about Indianapolis. The execution of that event was just flawless. It was incredible. We were proud to be Hoosiers. But you know, we know he's a problem solver. We know he can repair many different things. But the real question that I have, the real challenge before him, I believe, is, can he repair Peyton Manning? Right? Come on now. So, all of this attention has not gone unnoticed. There has been talk. There's been a lot of public talk. But he's raised his level to the attention in which now, most recently, he was given an opportunity to respond to President Barack Obama's State of the Union address back in January. He continues to be the benchmark for leadership. And how can anyone blame anyone because he's a Hoosier? I mean, how do you beat a Hoosier? And there are still whispers throughout the universe. Help me, Mitch Daniels, you're my only hope. So, without further ado, and hopefully with a sense of humor, Governor Mitch Daniels.
Well, Hank and Jay and Brenda and everyone present, thanks for the chance to come back. This has been a tremendous forum and opportunity for me in the past, and I'm thrilled that in this 8th year, you know, the welcome mat was still open, or still out. So much appreciated. We're getting close to the end of what's been a real adventure. And when he passed away last year, a lot of Andy Rooney's best lines were brought back. One that caught my eye has been on my mind. He said, life is like a roll of toilet paper. The closer you get to the end, the faster it seems to go. And being governor is just a little bit like that. But we've always wanted to move fast. I appreciate Hank remembering that we did say, it's funny, things you just say off the cuff sometimes stick with people more than phrases that you work to think up. And I did say on election night 2004, Mayor Tyler, I was talking to you at the time, I was talking to legislators, I think at the moment, I said, buckle up. You know, we got a lot of work to do, and we're going to try to speed the pace of things. I heard a joke one time. There was a snail got mugged by 3 turtles. And when the officer got there, he said, "Who did this to you?" He says, "I don't know, sir. It all happened so fast." We were out to change the definition of what fast is in Indiana, and to become more, not just, as people say, embracing of change, but committed to change, committed to leading change. And I hope it's becoming a habit in Indiana. I'll mention a few ways today in which I would assert that it has. But has been a great run and been a lot of great moments. My wife Sherry and I were, after a long week, a couple Fridays ago, sort of sat back, and she leaned back in her chair and a glass of wine. We were sort of reminiscing, and she heaved a sigh and said, "I love you." I said, "Aw, honey." I said, "Now is that you talking or the wine?" She said, "It's me talking to the wine." I'm taking the lazy man's approach to a speech here, and I brought it, as I think I have once or twice before, a few facts and figures, a little slideshow, but I'll try to move through it quickly, and I'm sure the most illuminating part of the conversation will be the one you lead through your questions, so please, someone prepare some. I don't have anything to say about presidential politics, the presidential race, unless compelled to in the questions. I can't figure it out anyway. It's been one surprise after another. Any prediction I would have had had been wrong steadily. I mean, for instance, who would have thought that the polygamist in the race would not be either of the two Mormons? So I've just given up trying to understand it. So let's see if I can find the right arrow here. Yeah, here we go. That's a promising start. Oh yeah, I don't know why I put this in there. The guy behind the glass panel says, "This is what keeps good people from seeking public office." You know. Somebody said the other day, it's a darn shame. 99% of our politicians are giving the other 1% a bad name. There's no connection with the guy in jail in Illinois. It happened being the first, well, maybe there is. I tell a story frequently of being out and visiting prison over in Rockville 2-3 years ago, and the warden, in introducing me, made a big deal out of how often I've gone to visit our correctional facilities, and it's true that I have. And he goes on and on how he'd been the warden at Michigan City, and no governor had ever come there, and I'd come twice, and here was again at Rockville. And so finally it's my turn to get up, and I said, "Dave, thanks for noticing. Yeah, we do value the work that goes on in these important, dangerous facilities. So you're making too much of this. In Illinois, the governors go to prison all the time." You know who laughed the loudest? The inmates. No, the point of this, and I could show you, we could spend the rest of the morning looking at headlines like this. I just got back from the governor's meeting. Still, there are states just doing really incredibly difficult things. Huge cuts to public education, huge cuts to higher education, and closing of parks. 70% of the parks in California have been closed for lack of money. We are far from working our way out as state governments of the recession. But Indiana's in a somewhat different picture, and I hope this is visible in the back. I'll try to talk you through it a little bit. So on the far left, 2001, 3 years in which the state was in an essentially bankrupt position, that is to say, bills exceeded cash. And then we climbed out of that, as Hank made mention. On the far right, the last two bars are the year we're in, fiscal year we're in, ends in June, and then the year that starts July 1, the 2 years of the current budget cycle. These are projected state reserves, so the amount by which our cash exceeds our liabilities. People ask, or at least used to, "My goodness, how'd you turn this thing around?" I always say something silly like, "Well, it's very mysterious, you know. Get out a pencil, you want to write this down. We spent less money than we took in." You know, but the red bar on the right is a 9-year average of about 6% annual spending growth. That's okay if your revenue's growing that fast, but it wasn't. It was growing on average less than 4%, and you do that for a few years, and you'll wind up in some trouble. The rate of spending growth came down, as you see. In fact, the compound average for our soon-to-be 7 years in office is between 1% and 2%. It's about half the rate of inflation. And even though revenues collapsed for a while, we managed to stay ahead and come to this point. On the left, that's 2004. Indiana was not a big spending state, but we were 37th in that respect. There are now only 3 states in the nation that spend less per capita than we do. Each time, including the budget that we're in, I've asked the legislature, it's their job to write the budget, but I just try to set boundary conditions of what I believe are as a basic framework, and then work with them on filling in all the detail. And these were the basic requests I made, and they honored them. No tax increases. In a weak economy, still not a time to be taking money out of the pockets of those who earned it. Structural balance means dollars in exceeds dollars out each year. So there's a lot of ways governments paper over, pretend they're in balance when they're not, but this means true, honest balance, and as number 4 says, with no gimmicks. There are a lot of things government does. Indiana's not been the worst offender, but in the past we did things like not put the, in essence, take money out of the teacher pension fund and pretend it was real revenue. We put an end to that. We don't do that anymore. And it says on number 3, a sufficient level of reserves to protect taxpayers. I guess I'll show you again in a minute, but we believe it's really important to keep at least 8, 10, or more % of the budget in the savings account as a protection against another downturn or slowdown. So this is general fund revenue, and as business people, many of you, you'll see our dilemma in the green bars. That's 2005 on the left, and the revenues grew, not dramatically, but they grew at a few % the first 3 years. And then came the popping of the bubble, the housing bubble, and the recession that followed. And revenues dropped all across the country, federal government, state governments, and so forth, as dramatically as perhaps they ever have. And if you look at the 2 yellow bars, which is, again, this year and next year, you'll see that maybe this year, 5 years later, revenues, unadjusted for inflation, just as they say, nominal revenues, will finally catch up with 2008. So if you're running a business and your sales were lower in 2011 than they were in 2007 or 8, you've had to do some tough things if you're still around, and we did, but with the help of people in both parties and a really good administration of the people executing in the executive branch, we've made it. So we're back to state reserves, the rainy day, you could call it, the savings account. And again, on the far right, this year and next year, we project to end this fiscal year with something like $1.7 billion or $1.8 billion. The total budget of the state's about 14, so you're talking about 12 or 13% of next year's expenditures in reserve. There's almost no state in America that's in that position of safety and security. And now, a few other things have gone on during this time. We have become much less of a debtor state. Our state debt, all in, has gone down 42% in the last 7 years. Interesting coincidence, the 50-state average for state debt has gone up 42%. We've passed an awful lot of states going the other direction. The components of this you wouldn't be able to read, but the green bars was the gimmicks I talked about. The state, part of the bankrupt condition of the state back in 04 and 05 was that, again, we had delayed payments. The state had delayed payments to schools and to Ball State and other universities and to cities like Muncie because it didn't have the cash. So it made them wait for 6 months or 9 months, and essentially it was an interest-free loan from Muncie to the state, Ball State to the state, so forth. So we knocked all that off, caught those payments up, and that's the green bars. The purple bars was the bonds we owed on the toll road, and we made a little transaction you may remember there and paid those off, and then paid down other forms of debt. So 42% down. We now have the 3rd lowest debt per capita in the country. We have a AAA bond rating for the first time in state history, and one of just a handful left in America. Interesting, isn't it, that your state has a better credit rating than the United States of America? This is state full-time state employees, 1976 on the far left, the current year on the far right. We have the fewest state employees now in Indiana since 1975. Total personnel expenses in the year last year, the year we completed last June, were actually less. So salaries, health care, and everything cost you as taxpayers less than it had 7 years before that. Again, not adjusted for inflation, just in raw dollars. Total health care expenses. Now think about this. You know how fast they've been going up. You've either been paying it as a business, or perhaps you're in the business of health care, as many are. But total health care expenses for state government were less. There are a couple stories there. One is fewer employees, and one is, we think, a little smarter way of delivering health insurance. But that means we have more money to do the things that matter most, more money for K-12, more money for everything. That's a priority of state government. The next 2 or 3 slides, though, I want to illustrate something that's very, very important to me, and I hope to you. This has come at a time at which state services were improving. In other words, the economy did not come at the expense of service, and we measure everything. I could show you 100 of these. I just picked 2 or 3 at random. This is the number of days it takes for your tax refund to come back from the Department of Revenue. This is the BMV average transaction time, total visit times in the BMV last month. That is the instant you're in the door to the instant you're out the door, less than 14 minutes. Best in America. Wonderful turnaround job by those folks. Never fails to get it. You know, I guess because we all deal with it, we all remember what it was. I always used to say that people would go to the Indiana BMV with a box lunch and a copy of War and Peace and hope not to finish them both before somebody called their name. This is data that was just released the other day, a huge turnaround. We had probably the worst child welfare, child protection system in America 7 or 8 years ago. Important for you to know, I showed you those slides about all the spending reduction and restraint and all the rest. There was only one thing we added spending to. We doubled the number of caseworkers in this, and we created a whole new department that's dedicated to this. And a couple days ago, the new data came out, and the number of child fatalities has been cut in half. There are a lot of other things we measure that probably tell you more about this, but the number of apparently endangered children from abuse or neglect that received a visit every month has gone from 23% to essentially 100% in this time. So it's a heartbreaking business because you can never get anything to zero, but these folks are doing a magnificent job, and we've invested to make sure they can. This is road building, one of many ways we could measure it, but in most states in the country, they can't fix the potholes they've got, and you know that we are building all kinds of projects, 200 and some projects in the so-called Major Moose program that we couldn't have built before the toll road transaction. This is conservation, which not as many people know about, but we work just as hard on, and Indiana is probably the nation's leader right now in protecting wetlands and habitats and waterways and natural beauty God gave us, and we've got some big projects that you'll be real proud of that'll be put together over the next 2 or 3 years. I've stumbled over this a few months ago. I thought it was really worth noting. An outfit in New York did a national study about the effectiveness or not of state governments, and they surveyed people around the country, and Indiana was second in the country. Indiana citizens were second in the country in their confidence in state government. 77% said they viewed their state government as efficient. And that really matters a lot to us. Our view has always been government should be very careful not to do things it shouldn't. But the things government must do, it must do as well as it possibly can, and we work on it all the time. Because we've been careful with spending and so many other areas, Indiana now enjoys an interesting distinction. K-12 education is a bigger part of the budget here than in any state in the country. 55 cents plus of every income tax, sales tax, excise tax dollar that you pay to state government goes to K-12 education. And it shows the commitment that Hoosiers have to this important function, and it's something I think we can all be proud of. On the flip side, by being careful with what you spend, we have not had to raise taxes. There are very few states that have stayed off this map. Most states have raised taxes, and some, including some of our neighbors, have raised them multiple times. They still can't catch up to the spending that they're doing. Why do we keep tax? Why do we insist on keeping taxes down? One, to protect family budgets. But two, because our main goal from the very beginning has not been just to balance budgets or even to run government as well as we possibly can. Our main goal has been to build an Indiana of opportunity, a place where talented people and people with dollars to invest would come and create jobs and new possibilities in life for other people. And that's why we've been so fixated on that, and we've come an awful long way. So I've got a lot more of these than I'll show you, but this is Site Selection Magazine, and this is the area development. These are the people who help folks find real estate for new business. So these are both the categories of people who we work with in trying to woo business to our state. And this is a Chief Executive Magazine, so this is a survey of CEOs around the country. This is just taxes as calculated by the most reputable source on that one subject. This was a rather interesting one. These people cross-hatched economic freedom and personal freedom in an index that said that Indiana provides its citizens more total freedom than all but a couple states. U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Now, we've got another real asset. You represent it here in East Central Indiana as well as any place I know, but just something that I like to share with folks. This is a calculation done by a national study of the productivity of workers, how much output per worker, and Indiana's #1. So it's a great documentation of something we all know. We've got great, loyal, stable workforce in this state, and companies that come here and experience that are almost always pleased with the contrast to other places that they operate. Here's another little something, more feature of the modern economy. This is broadband connection speed, and I bet you can't read that at all, but anyway, we are, by every measure now, in the top 10. They can measure average speed, they can measure peak connection speed, where we're actually a little bit better, I think 6th. And we just became the 23rd right-to-work state in America, which we know and already have dozens of calls from new companies that are interested in us to whom that had been an obstacle before. What's it all about ultimately? I don't know whether this fact will be, I hope it'll be the beginning of a trend. All I know is that it's very different from what went before. In the last few years, Indiana's population grew at the fastest rate between Iowa and Maine. Not as fast as the national average, because the Sun Belt states are still outgrowing the rest of the country by a wide margin. But anywhere in the neighborhood we inhabit, among those states, we grew faster. We also know that in the last 3 years, in a big turnaround, more college graduates moved into Indiana than moved out of Indiana. Ultimately, when we're all in the rocking chairs, this is what we hope will have become the reality of our time, that Indiana was a place that shook itself by the lapels, became a leadership state in category after category, and built a climate that is so inviting to investment and to smart and talented people that they gravitated here. We know once they come here, they'll love it. People always do. I think that there's evidence that we've made a lot of change. I like to say to those who remember that little catchphrase about buckling up, check to make sure your seatbelts are still securely fastened, because we've got a whole lot more work to do. Thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
We're okay now. Okay, let me begin let you know where I'm coming from. I'm a diehard conservative, longtime Republican, and a Mitch Daniels fan. So that being said, one of the questions I have. Yes, there's always a catch, isn't there? But with your educational changes that you're making, which I am in support of. My wife taught public education for over 30 years, but she quit 10 years before retirement age because of the conditions. Not yours, but just because of what was going on. I have a sister-in-law who's in elementary ed, a teacher of the year. She is concerned not only for her own job, but for her students. Your incentives, what you're trying to do, I'm behind 100%. I think you may be hitting the wrong target when you're going after people, or the people are perceiving, the good teachers, as I call them, are worried. Those that aren't really don't give a damn anyway. And I just wanted to make that statement, so maybe you can revisit some of these things to give some of the teachers who we know are good some relief from some of these demands that were made on them.
Well, I would like to have a chance to talk to anybody who sees it that way, because their interests and ours are completely aligned. This is all about doing better by the best teachers. We've had, there'll never be a system of perfect fairness here, but I can't imagine anything less fair than what we had, which said that seniority was everything, effectiveness was meant nothing, and didn't matter how good a job you did, what you were as an effective teacher, you stood behind those who'd been around longer. We had teachers of the year, you mentioned. We had teachers of the year laid off or sent to some place they didn't want to go just because they didn't have enough seniority. That's exactly the problem we were out to fix. And the rating system, the teacher quality effectiveness, from now on, for those who hadn't followed this, and by the way, it's a national trend. We either get on this bus or be left behind. But in the teacher quality systems, which are being set up locally, by the way, the state's not cramming one down anybody's throat. It can be designed locally so we can learn what's the fairest way to do it. But the entire point here was to value effectiveness based, at least in significant part, on whether the kids are growing and learning or not. You know, 99% of Indiana teachers, when anybody bothered to rate them, and some districts didn't even bother, were rated effective, but only a third of our kids could pass the national exams. There's a disconnect there. So, the teacher quality part, and by the way, those who disagree are in a very dwindling minority. President Obama and his Secretary of Education think our teacher quality is not as tough as standards are not as tough as they ought to be. So, going forward, protection and promotion, and I hope compensation in Indiana schools will be based on how good a teacher is, whether they just walked in the door or been there 30 or 40 years. And you know, we'll never, I'm sure, find a system of perfect fairness, but those don't exist on this earth. There'll be a huge improvement over what we had, which was just seniority by tenure.
Yeah, Cecil Bohannon, Department of Economics, Ball State. What you've outlined here, I think, is wonderful. It's sort of the Indiana plan for getting governments in balance by promoting efficiency and keeping taxes low. What parts of this do you think could be applied to the federal budget problem? What obstacles would be in Washington? I think we know those, but what kind of obstacles would be to implementing something like this in D.C.?
Yes, thank you, Professor, and for your work, which is really consistently useful, and I read it whenever I spot it. Well, the federal government is both, they would see it blessed, I would see it cursed by a very fundamental difference of which you're aware. They have a printing press and we don't. And this allows them to borrow in, so far, but not forever, unlimited quantities, and where necessary to simply create money for their own spending, therefore postpone difficult decisions. you know, so much of what we did here, I think, was advantaged by the fact that we didn't wait around. I always say my my favorite country and western song title was, "If I'd shot you when I should have, I'd be out of jail by now." Which is just another way of saying no time like the present, you know. And the second reality is that Washington's budget is increasingly devoured by automatic spending programs, by income transfer programs. Each has a noble intention, and in fact, one of the most important things we got to do as a society is save them. I'm talking about Social Security and Medicare particularly. We've got to save the safety net before it collapses of its own weight and takes the economy with it. But you know, this is now, you put those two things in interest together, you got 3/4 or something of the entire federal budget, and that cannot go on forever. So these are the couple of challenges that they have. I happen to be an optimist in this area. I do believe if we would simply act to begin the process, let's say, of creating a sustainable Social Security system in the future, it would send a powerful signal. The world markets would continue to finance the United States if they just saw we don't intend to become Greece. We're right behind Greece right now, just by a matter of a few percentage points. There are political dynamics out there that are very, very difficult, as we all know, the polarization of the parties. I just hope earnestly for a new national administration which says this is the most important threat we face. Regardless of our views, I say to people all the time, let's have the ideological debate tomorrow. You know, some folks sincerely believe in a larger and more involved federal government than I might. It doesn't make any difference. The arithmetic doesn't work, and we're all endangered by debt levels that will undo all our priorities, and more importantly, the American project, the whole notion of a growing economy that offers unlimited opportunity to people who start with nothing. The dream of upward mobility is the core of this country, and that's what's really so severely threatened. And I say it over and over again, it's not a philosophical statement, it's a matter of mathematics. You can't run any enterprise of any size, public or private, with the debt levels we've piled up. And the only reason we're getting away with it is because we're the reserve currency of the world. And, you know, right now it's convenient for the world to use the dollar, but the day they don't trust it, things will start to unravel in a hurry. And so we better act before that happens.
Julie Baring, 80 Real Estate. Where do we stand on the expansion of I-69?
Ahead of schedule and under budget, Julie, which is a statement I can make about 200 or 300 road projects right now. No, I'm very happy to say that, and I'm happy to get the question here, by the way, because I try to make the point over and over that it's the whole network we're trying to build. This is improving any spoke of the infrastructure wheel in Indiana makes not just the towns along that road closer to the rest of the economy, but many other places as well. So I've told the people in Evansville for years, we're going to find a way to do this. We're going to build this road, but it's not about you, really. It's not about you alone, anyway. It's about all the towns near 69, and in fact on all the interstates that connect to 69. But I'm happy to say, yes, we'll be at Crane by the end of the year, Bloomington in another year and a half, and at that point you're connected to 37, which is already a divided 4-lane highway. It'll take a few more years to make it limited access, but yeah, it'll be a reality.
I'm Lois Rockhill with Second Harvest Food Bank. I really appreciate the strides that Indiana has made, the positive reports that you have shown us today. A recent study was done, and the reports have just come in, though, that Indiana has a ranking that we are not proud of, and that is 16th in the nation for food hardship. 1 in 5 of our households in Indiana are suffering from hunger sometime during the year. And I know that the work that's being done for job creation is very important. The school work is very important. But we have to have our people fed so that they have the nutrition they need, the health they need to do the jobs that we hope will be available to them. It's been a big burden on both public and private organizations to fill the gap, the food gap. And I wonder, what do you see as the state's responsibility, not the long run picture, but this short run of people being hungry today?
Okay, Lois, first of all, let me thank you for the work of Second Harvest. It's a wonderful organization, and everybody here who gets a chance to support it, I would encourage to do so. But secondly, I would urge you to, look at these numbers with extreme caution. This whole idea of food hardships is a new notion, and when you look underneath it, it doesn't mean that people are missing meals. In fact, when they ask the people who are supposedly occasionally are in this category how many meals they miss, it's almost zero. The number one problem of people in poverty in this country is obesity, the health problem. It's very different, than in the 60s when the so-called war on poverty was launched. The number one health issue of children in poor homes was malnutrition. Today it's obesity. We are spending unprecedented amounts. We have unprecedented numbers of Hoosiers on food stamps. So the public commitment in this area has never been anything like what it is today. I think the state's responsibility, of course, is to do all we can in these areas, but there's also got to be a component here of better education about good nutrition, about what to eat and what not to eat, and an encouragement to people to live their own lives as responsibly as they can. If you took the money we are spending as a nation today on the whole panoply of what we call anti-poverty programs and just handed it, and by the way, not counting Social Security and Medicare, the two biggest, just handed it to those people below what we call the poverty line, it'd be between $20,000 and $25,000 cash per person. So a household might be $60,000 or $80,000. It's not exactly the most efficient mechanism we found here, is it? So, not for a minute to minimize the very serious problem. Thank goodness we have organizations like Second Harvest that are augmenting in the most American of ways, that is person to person, heart to heart, what the government can do. We have not solved this problem despite the investment of trillions of dollars of taxpayer money.
You'll probably have an opportunity to perhaps leave an envelope behind for the next governor. And I'm wondering what top 3 things you might suggest to the next governor in terms of opportunities that are just within our grasp to achieve. And perhaps what are the 3 areas in which you would say they're worthwhile, but they're going to be a distraction you might want to avoid?
Are you a Presbyterian, All our Presbyterian sermons operate in 3s, It's just sort of curious. In terms of what next and things to do, I would put higher education at probably at or near the top of my list. It's such a valuable asset for the state. We're very, very fortunate. I think to have more excellent public and private colleges and universities than a state our size might ordinarily have. But there's some real challenges, I think, both the affordability, of course, the quality, honestly, of much of what is being taught. The business model, especially of our big universities, I think is very shaky. And I gather the public university presidents together a couple times a year just because I think it's so important. And I asked them the last time we were together, I said, help me understand why you're not the next Borders Books. That is to say, huge capital fixed costs, bricks and mortar everywhere, very expensive, and meanwhile technologies and new ways of delivering learning sprouting up everywhere. So I think modernizing the model and shaping it to the needs of today's students, and that means people young and not young, is a great opportunity. And if we can get that right sooner than other states, we have a great thing going for us. I think we've all learned that we need to be a little more broad-gauged in our thinking about what higher education is. And Ivy Tech doing a great job of catching up first with other states. We've been way behind in the community college setting, but we're gaining on the field very fast. And their new emphasis on certificated learning is a great opportunity for a lot of our young people. A four-year college degree is a great thing, but it's not the only valuable credential these days. And for a lot of people, it's not the best passport to a successful middle-class life. So I put higher ed in 2 or 3 forms very near the top. We'll have continuing infrastructure challenges. We didn't solve them for all time. We just vaulted ahead with the Major Moves program. Long term, Indiana's got great advantage in water. We're sitting on a lot of water, and a lot of states are starting to run out. How do we turn that into a strategic advantage? How do we attract the industries that require a lot of it? Is some of that an asset? We have far more than we'll ever need. Is there some of that an asset that could be turned into dollars or other assets and applied to the needs that we have? Full-day kindergarten, by the way, I appreciate you mentioning it. We've been after that for a long time. At the close of this budget, we will have gone from maybe 20% of Indiana 5-year-olds in full-day kindergarten to 100% of Indiana 5-year-olds in full-day kindergarten. That's a big step forward. And it could be there should be a step beyond that, at least for certain kids in preschool. That could be the next target.
I think we have time for one more question. Sir, would you stand please?
Sir, I'm a psychiatrist by profession and a medical director of MERIDIAN Services. The Ohio shooting has scared all of us. One of the major concerns we have, the families have not been as good as it used to be in 30s and 40s. In the last 3 decades I have been here off and on, I've seen it going further down. We may not change the family pattern, however, there's more need for help, particularly in the sense of mental health for the families, because treating one mother means treating a family, her husband, her children, and maybe grandchildren. It's just a comment to make sure that treating a diabetic patient is very important, and I understand that. Treating hypertension and any other medical illness is equally important, but that affects one person. Treating mental health basically means treating a whole family and maybe the generations after that.
Yeah.
My comment only is to make sure that we, as a citizens of the United States, as a countryman of the United States, as well as a part of the Indiana, it may be very important to make sure that we continue to provide the financial help and the needs of those patients who cannot pay for themselves, yet they are going to be the part of the future of the United States.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Doctor. And I was in the healthcare business a long time. I learned about and I'd like to think our company, an Indiana company, the inventors of Prozac, for instance, had a lot to do with really a national, new national awareness that these are treatable diseases, not defects of the soul. I mean, everybody gets that now, but I promise you, when 20 years ago, people didn't. And so I think we've come a long way in understanding the importance of what you're talking about, and it is better funded and supported and accepted as among the most necessary of medical treatments. Now, let me just finish by linking back. I'm not sure I got to 3 on Hank's request list, but I can do it here. I don't have an answer for this, but perhaps the fundamental problem facing our state and every state in this country right now at least the one that if we ever saw a change, comparable to the change in attitudes toward smoking cigarettes, comparable even to the change in attitudes toward mental illness that we've seen, would do more to help prevent hunger, would do more to help ensure high-quality educational results, would do more to alleviate all the heartbreaking social pathologies that we worry about. And that is, if once again people began to form and maintain stable families. I've said on many occasions, if I ever found that lamp on the beach and the genie came out, I'd tell him he could keep 2 of his 3 wishes. My only wish would be that every child in Indiana, every child in America, be raised in an intact home till the age of majority. It doesn't even have to be a father knows best home. Just the stability, the presence, and the attention, the better economics that come with having 2 parents in the home would dramatically alleviate so many of our problems in a way that government, frankly, never will. And illegitimacy, that's the term we used to use in America, you've probably just read, now passing 50%. 75% of African American kids will never have a father in the home. 50-some% of Hispanic kids, it's now 29% of Caucasian kids. Heroic things will happen in many of those homes. Single parents who bring it off are the most valuable citizens we have. But the deck is stacked against them and against their children. Mental illness will be more prevalent in those homes, you know. And so I'm sorry for a long answer, but this is just such a central question. You ask, what can we dream about doing something about? Government not very good at this. If I thought I'd seen a program, an answer, a grant that would address it, you can believe we'd have done it. But I'll just say that anything we can do in public or private life to foster the idea that this is the most noble thing a person can do in life, really. And on the flip side, it's incredible disservice to children to not to try your very best, at least, to give them that sort of environment to grow up in. And so that'd be number 1 on my list of 3, Hank. That would be my dream doctor for how tragedies like Ohio are less frequent in the future, along with so many other of the problems that worry us about our society today. I'm so grateful for the chance to be back. Thank you very much for all the great things you're doing for Muncie. Good luck to your new mayor. He's got the bit in his teeth, I can tell, and I just know that great things lie ahead for this greatest of Indiana cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, for sharing some of your valuable time with us this morning. You're certainly welcome here anytime. We always enjoy listening to you and what's happening in the state of Indiana. A couple of items before we leave. There's certainly thanks to all of you for attending and to our sponsors who made this morning possible. But there's also a group of people that I'd like for you to help me thank. My co-workers worked very diligently to put this together. Brenda Brumfeld, Nancy Norris, Aaron Alstock, our good friends at the Horizon Convention Center and AMS. Can you please help me thank all of those folks? And lastly, just a save the date. We received confirmation just yesterday afternoon. Our good friends Mike McDaniel, Ann Delaney, and Jim Shella will be here on April 18th for their newest version of Let's Talk Politics in Muncie. So save the date, April 18th, that evening. We'll get more information out to you. Please travel safely back to home and work. Thank you again.